Hello there, welcome to the show. Today I'm talking about Frankenstein, which is a Guillermo Del Toro adaptation. So now there's been plenty of Frankensteins over the years. You had the Silence that were like very short. You had the famous James Whale film Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Then you had all the sequels to that weren't made by Whale and Karloff got out them pretty fast. Then you had the Hammer versions, which were all about the actual, instead of the monster, it was all about the creator played by Peter Cushing. And since then you've had like TV versions, really, and an odd movie. You've had the good ones like the Bernard Rose Frankenstein, and you've had the not so good one, which is the Branagh version of Frankenstein, which covered a lot more than novel than most adaptations, but was so over the top and it kind of lacked subtlety. So you were watching that thinking, this should have been better. You know, it was like some bits were way too long, other bits were way too short, and so it kind of never really figured out how to do the book as a film. It just said, we'll do the whole book, and never really figured it out, like scene to scene, how to do it. Now the Del Toro version is also a film that is going, we're going to do the book, and have it start in Antarctica and come back, and have the story being told of what happened, and giving the whole tragedy of the ambition of Frankenstein and the tragedy of the creature. But unlike the Branagh version, this version actually knows it's impossible to do a full adaptation that's entirely loyal to the book. It's like you have to find your own way into the book, your way into the story, and do your own thing with it, ultimately, to make it work. So, on one hand, it looks a lot more like the kind of loyal classical adaptation, but it takes a lot from Whale and Hammer in a sense of you can't literally do that. You have to find your own way in. With Whale, he found his way in through humour and through the idea of hubris and the tragedy of this creature who was born in and then abandoned quite softly. While the Hammer versions, it was like the sociopathic nature of Frankenstein himself, like what he's about, what he's going to do, how he doesn't really care about the creatures. So they found a ways in and found out what's important to us about this story, and they focused on that. And that's what Del Toro does essentially. He has the scope of the other film. So it's 2.5 hours long, which is probably the longest version of Frankenstein we're going to get in anything that's essentially like a one movie experience. It's not split up into a mini-series or anything. That's probably the longest you're going to get. But it was made by Netflix. So you got a very token theatrical release, and then now it's on Netflix. I managed to watch it on my projector, so I got to see some of the theatrical elements, but it never came anywhere near me. I don't know where it played, but I don't think it played very much in the UK. So we basically get a very theatrical film that you probably have to see on TV, so you'd hope for a big TV, really. Yeah, well, one of my big recommendations is try and see as big a screen as possible. If you have a projector, watch on the projector. You know, do not watch on TV if there's a way to watch it on a bigger screen. Because even though it's not like the most epic thing, like a blockbuster, the production design, the atmosphere, it does a lot for the film. And you really want to have that to juxtapose against the kind of quieter scenes. So there's a lot there. There's a lot going on in the film that you'd like a big screen for. But the film essentially is a story in two parts. We start off, they're trying to reach the North Pole. I'm not sure if I said Antarctica or whatever I said earlier on. But they're trying to reach the North Pole. They find as they move, as the ship trying to get to the North Pole has basically stuck. That's when they find Frankenstein, and he's been attacked by this creature, and they can't kill the creature. The creature just keeps on going and going because the creature seems to have these powers which are beyond human comprehension. So when Frankenstein's in the ship and recovering, they get him to tell the story of what happened. And essentially, the interesting thing here is you get it from both sides. You get the Frankenstein tells the first half of the story about the creation of the creature, and then the creature arrives in the ship and tells Frankenstein his side of the story, which starts at the point where the Frankenstein story ends. The Frankenstein part of the story ends is where the creature story begins. So for this storytelling technique, it basically means we can get the kind of hubristic side of Victor, and you also get the human side of the creature, and you get to see why decisions were made. So the story, the overall story is about Victor actually understanding in the creature in a way that he never could before by this structure of the story. But also it shows you the kind of how they're both isolated from each other, understanding each other. They can't quite get what each other's about, and that kind of is something that goes through the film. Everyone's got their own need. They don't understand each other in this film at all. They have theories. They have views in the characters, but they don't quite get all the characters. Don't get each other in a kind of healthy way. There is a kind of father and son element, but there's also a father and son element to Victor and his father. His father, you see early on, as someone who is a doctor who travels around. From Victor's point of view, this man married his mother for her money and abandons her most of the time to go and be a doctor to the local community, and it's fairly cold and it's fairly exacting to Victor. So you get his point of view, and he's like, I'm not going to be like this guy, I'm not going to be like this guy. And his father dies fairly early in his life, as does his mother. His mother dies in childbirth. And his mother's played by Mia Goth, who also returns later on as Elizabeth, who's the main love interest in the film. And she's darker skinned, because Oscar Isaac plays Frankenstein, so he comes into the story as someone who's much darker skinned than everyone else. He's an outsider, he's isolated. He doesn't look like the other Europeans. But, you know, there's a taint of the kind of Latin element in him that's different from everyone else. So that makes him isolated but also egotistical. And it also suggests that it creates this thing in him. He's a showman. He's like, I'm not going to let you talk down to me. I'm going to be the centre of attention. So he compensates by being a showman and being by a great scientist, and nothing like his father, who he didn't think his father loved him all. He thought his father loved the younger son William and not him. And as the film goes on, you start to realise that you're only really seeing it from his point of view. You don't have a clue what his father actually thought of him, because you never see his father outside of Victor's point of view. And the film it's not a simplistic version of it is it's about the sons making the same mistakes as the fathers and not realising they're very much like the fathers. But it's much more like the sons from the Frankenstein from his father and the creature from Frankenstein, they never find a way to look objectively at the person that came before them as a flawed person. They see them as very important to them. They don't ever really see them as people. They're too emotionally tied, and it's like what these kind of emotional ties does to a person as they're looking at someone else and trying to not be them, not be what they see as their mistakes, but actually they're going to make their own mistakes, and sometimes they're going to echo the elder mistakes, but sometimes they're not. So it's how complicated the relationship is between father and son, and how certain things travel down, but not in a kind of obvious way. It's not like cruelty creates cruelty to the next person. It's how they interpret what they see as cruelty and move on, and how they interpret what they see as indifference, and how they interpret the flaws of the other person, and how they use it within themselves to create their persona, really. So it's much more complicated than the sins of the father. It's much more about the way human beings actually cannot comprehend each other and are distant from each other. So even if they feel close, even if they can see some elements of the other person that's accurate, there's other stuff they don't get about them, like at all. And it's like, how do we learn from our mistakes? How do we move on? How do we see things that are outside our experience, and how we can't sometimes, and how that causes tragedy? So Victor early on loses his mother, and she was the person who brought him close to humanity, to make him understand humanity and what it was, what understanding humanity actually is. So if she hadn't died, he probably would have understood people better, and he maybe not have felt so isolated and sort of distanced himself by being a showman, scientist, really. He views his father as being cruel and exacting. But when you see the father, after the mother dies, with young William, he's kind. And even from that point of view, you start to see that maybe it's definitely not just once. You've seen one side, but there's definitely both of them are going at each other. It's not just it's not as simple as Frankenstein likes to make out. Like, this guy does have feelings, but as Victor's kind of one who can push back at him, and he doesn't have his mother to protect him, to make him understand our side of humanity. So he becomes focused on being better than his father and at the job. His father dies early, so he can't actually confront him. So he's always chasing a ghost that can never talk back. And he's chasing death and trying to figure out death and figure out how to stop death, or how to transfer people into, how to adapt to bodies, and how to create bodies that are stronger, and how to move on from death, and how you can maybe move one brain from one dying body, to something else. So it's not like I am going to create life. It's much more like he's in the process of figuring out what death is and figuring out how we can improve things. He's like a scientist who's trying to just improve humanity and his view of humanity. And for him, that means what is death? How do we stop death the way we see it? Which is like, he's essentially trying to figure out how you can like bring people back from like using electroshock treatment and things like that. And the best way you can do it is build something through other bodies to create something that can be alive. He's not thinking of the consequences of this creature. He's thinking about the science of it all, and that's his passion. But he detaches himself from the humanity of it because of his traumas, and he hasn't processed his traumas. He just sees himself as fine. He's fine. His way of doing things is fine. He annoys people. He's arrogant, but he thinks, yeah, my flaws are my flaws, but I'm doing all this for the good of people. And he doesn't really care who he hurts to get his way. Like, he gets the bodies from wars. There's a wars going on all around him, and he's getting dead bodies of this creature from wars, from people being hung. And he's been financed by Christoph Waltz's character, who's a man who's dying. But Frankenstein doesn't see that to start with. Doesn't see that Waltz wants his brain put in the creature. When Victor realises he can't, because his brain's already been rotted by a disease. So it's not possible. So Victor actually is very kind of logical. He understands what the limitations are. He's just kind of doesn't understand how to deal with them well. He doesn't understand how to deal with his brother, or his brother's fiancée, who's called Elizabeth, who's another puppet to Mia Goth. She understands him well, that he's an arrogant sod, that he is brilliant, he can do things no one else can do, but he is vain. He does have limitations that he doesn't like dealing with. But of course, she sees him as the finished article. She doesn't. She doesn't really know what led to that. She just sees him as someone who is a problem, rather than someone who's been traumatized over time and just doesn't have the tools to kind of communicate and understand himself. So Goff's basically playing the person who he needed when he was a young man, to learn about humanity in the shape of his mother. And now when she comes back, she's a person who understands his limitations and how he can't cross over to the rest of humanity. And she's the one of the people who understands kindness and her trying to deal with people with kindness in a way that he doesn't quite get. His brother gets it. Younger brother gets it. His younger brother he disdains for being like conventional, but his younger brother's actually stable and a decent person in a way that Victor never can be. So you get this half the story about Victor and his hubris and what he's about. So it's much more about that than the creation scene. The creation scene is terrifically done, but it's all about Victor and what he's about, why he's the way he is. And Oscar Isaac plays Victor without any vanity. He plays him like a guy who's deluded in a way that a lot of brilliant people can be deluded in thinking they know what's best, they know where the everything's going, they know exactly what they're doing when they really don't, but they're high in their own supply. But it's a very human characterization. It's just someone who just cannot see himself objectively, and he has lots of needs he's not understanding. I mean, he understands the egomaniac, but he doesn't understand why he's an egomaniac and what the downfalls of that. And that's where he becomes a cropper in the second half of the story, where the creature's born, the creature does not instantly know how to do things, and the creature instantly sees Victor as cruel. So the creature just sees Victor as something that's to be scared of and who's damaged, and just instantly gets the vibes of, this guy is, let's keep away from this guy. This guy's no good. So he doesn't get what Victor's actually about. So because of Victor's hubris and Victor's inability to understand humanity, he destroys his creation almost instantly before he can actually do anything useful with it. And he also doesn't realise that even a partial success with this creature, initially not saying much, it's still a success. He still brought life to this creature. He can still show the creature off as like, this is what I did. It's the first stage of something better. No, he just is a petulant child. He didn't get what he wanted. Well, Goff's character interacts with the creature, and she understands its humanity. So he kind of bonds with her rather than Victor. And then when Victor's finally had enough and he's mad, he decides just to kill the creature because he's not going to be... he can't take his view of failure. Plus, he's accidentally killed Chris Walt's character after an argument just before the creature was born. So he's some guilt with that as well, and he's not dealing with that at all. But he blames the creature for the death rather than accepting it was his fault. So he makes a creature basically an outcast without any help before the creature can even really get a grasp of what it is. So at that point we go to the creature's point of view, and we see the creature's just... everyone's terrified of it. It's on the run, and eventually you have a sequence with the blind man and his family, where the family will, if they see the creature, will be terrified, but the blind man can't see. He can just understand this is a decent soul in there that's uncorrupted. So the creature becomes almost like the ghost helping this family out, but they never see. And they'll only ever see it when all hell breaks loose, when they're attacked by wolves, and it's like, oh, it's that thing, we have to kill it. So the creature instantly understands that it's at a disadvantage in life. People will not ever warm to it. Like, they're ignorant, they're kind of scared the way Victor was scared, but they're even more ignorant about it than even Victor was. So he gets a very dark view of humanity fairly quickly. And it's like what happens when someone gets a crash course on how shitty human beings can be. Because when you realise most people who have families who love them have a fairly easy time of it, even if they're moan like, oh, I have to go to school, I have to go do this, do that. People are, tell me off for this or that. They have a fairly easy view of it. If you're actually living in a country that's a war zone or a family in a civilized country, you see the other side of humanity and you see how dark it can be pretty quick. And how sentimental it can be, unsentimental it can be. And that's what the creature gets. Victor got the pampered view. He thinks he's a difficult view, but actually he's a pampered existence compared to others. And the creature gets the rough end. So he's like, the creature basically goes to him, finds out who Victor was, where he is, and goes to him when Victor's brother's getting married to Elizabeth because she's completely rejected Victor at this point. And Victor's trying to act as if he's moved on and he's learned from mistakes, but everyone sees through it. Everyone sees he's a destructive person at this point. He's damaged well beyond the point of any return to humanity. He's like everyone's putting up with him, but everyone kind of, you can tell his brother and Elizabeth kind of they're like, we'll sell the house and we'll split the proceeds. Basically, so they can get rid of him and just say, like, you bugger off now and don't ever come and see us again. He's just this ogre in human form at this point. That's when the creature returns saying, you have to make me a mate because existence is hell for me. If you make me a mate, I will go somewhere isolated. I will disappear. You'll never hear from me again. And that's the most humane thing for everybody. Victor refuses. He thinks, oh no, because the creature's so much more powerful than expected, that if he makes another creature like that, maybe they will mate and create these progeny of other creatures like that. And he's like terrified of that because he doesn't understand what he's created. Now, we can say, well, just don't put any reproductive organs in the woman, but I don't think I'm dealing with someone who's thinking clearly at this point. He's actually now at the point of insanity. Like, he knows he's the person is the diseased person everyone hates. He knows that by now. All hell breaks loose, everyone dies, and Victor ends up chasing the creature to the North Pole, where the story goes full circle, where Victor understands the creature is not just a thing, but a human. It looks monstrous, that he has created something he's abandoned and he has responsibility that he's completely failed at. And the monster kind of has a better idea that this is just a guy. This is not some god. It's not a god. It's a guy who's just very flawed. So the moment of grace comes with the creature actually understanding that this guy who he's hated, this guy who he's despised because of all he's done to him and how he rejected him, it's just a flawed guy. That's it. That's all he is. There's nothing that he can do with that. So the creature's Victor develops enough grace to understand his failures, and the creature actually is the one who gets to move on a little bit, who gets to understand this cycle of not understanding each other. It's just a cycle of destruction and he just basically leaves humanity by the end of the film. But he has enough grace to help the explorers get the ship out of danger, and they manage to go back home with their tail, while the creature decides to live on away from humanity. So it is a story about people learning from the mistakes, but very painfully. And it is about how we were our own worst enemy, and even something like the creature who was kind at the start and who gets brutalized by humanity, he actually learns to get above that and understand, yeah, he is a monster. He has been tainted by the violence within, by the rejection of humanity, and he has to go beyond that somehow. He has to move on. So that's how it's optimistic. It's about someone realising the mistakes that were made and has to move on. So this is a wonderful film. Oscar Isaac is terrific as Victor. He's not asking for sympathy. Jacob Elordi is terrific as a creature who had never really... He'd been in a couple of things I hadn't really seen, but within 2 weeks I saw this in Old Canada, which I'll be covering next week. And he was really impressed with both of these films. He's a big guy, he's massively big. But the good thing is you're watching him and you're not thinking of Karloff at all. He is a creature that's unique to this film. It's this take on the creature. It's not as dead looking as Karloff, it's just malformed but it's got more of a grace to it. But it's still bigger than everybody, it's still dangerous. But it's a different version of that character, which is wonderful. So Del Toro understands what the good stuff was in the adaptation, what the bad stuff was. And he takes, basically, he's doing the novel, but it takes bits of Hammer, like he makes Frankenstein a sociopath, like Guillermo was. He goes full into that, but also like, well, what makes a guy like this? He takes the idea of the sympathetic creature from the whale version, but does his own version of that as well, where he doesn't look dead, but he's something else. But unlike the Karloff version that always felt there was a gentleness to it, this creature can be fierce and scary as well. And it does devolve into violence when it's denied any kind of human contact with any human grace. Where the people who it bonds with, there's no way to really keep bonding with them. It's just, humanity's a distant thing for it. But it learns to deal with its own problems and the cruelty of life with some grace at the end, which is different from the Karloff version, different from other Frankensteins. So yeah, this is a wonderful film. I highly recommend it. Del Toro's done Pinocchio and this within about 2 years, and they're both been wonderful. So if you've got Netflix, watch it. If you don't have Netflix, get Netflix for a month and watch it, and then cancel again. It's only a tenner or something like that anyway. It's worth the rental for Netflix for a month for this one. So I hope you enjoyed this video. That's me for now. Bye.